Nothing like a calf cramp. I don't know if anything comes close to it. Oh, and I'm sure if you're watching this video, you probably have experienced or are experiencing a calf cramp yourself. Don't mind my poor acting, but if you give me the next 10 minutes of your time, we're gonna go over a few different exercises as to how you can create better functioning calves so you don't have to deal with this annoying cramp later on. So to start with, let's begin by bringing a little bit more hydration and circulation into the calf. That way when we get into our corrective exercises, the calf muscles themselves will be a little bit more responsive. So to start with, you're gonna grab yourself a kettlebell. You can use a softball here as well, but we're gonna do a active release through the calves. So all I'm gonna do is come essentially right on top of this. And what I like to do is go right into the body of the calf to start with. So I'll kind of pull up where that is going to be located on the calf. And then we're just going to start by applying pressure into it. And if you feel that this isn't enough to begin with, this may be enough. We can actually take our other leg and stack on top here. And all we're going to initially start with for about the first 30 seconds is more or less just letting the tissue kind of get used to that sensation. And just letting initial circulation kind of come into and out of that area. And after about our 30-second period, we can start to work small ankle motions. So my left foot, this leg here that is getting the calf release, I'm going to slowly point my toes away, and then I'm just going to take my toes back up. And all we're doing here is taking the calf muscle through a little bit more of its active range of motion, while we kind of have this pinch and hold technique applied. And this is going to help with things like range of motion, mobility, and flexibility through that muscle. Once we go through this for about another 30 seconds to a minute, that is probably going to be quite tender as you're working through that. We're just going to start to work small rotations with the ankle. Woo! And we're going to think about trying to slowly go to those end ranges of motion as we are working that ankle rotation. We'll go maybe 15-20 seconds one way, and then all I'm going to do is alternate and come back the other way. In total, you should spend about 2 minutes on either side, and then that is going to get our calves a little bit more soft and prepared for the exercises that we have ahead. So for this next exercise, we're going to go through a hamstring bridge calf raise. So we're going to come into your conventional position where you're going to be on your back, getting ready to do a glute bridge. But what we're going to do is as we're coming up towards that top position, instead of staying flat on the feet, we're going to go a little bit into a calf raise. So again, we're going to create a little bit of contraction in through the calf muscles themselves. And then once I get to the top, my heels are just going to gently drop down. My hips can come back down, and then that whole cycle is going to repeat itself. What I like to envision as I go through this exercise is a slow and gradual building or accumulation of tension as I go through it. The intent here isn't to go from 0 to 100 where I just take my hips up, I lift my heels off the ground, and then just slam everything back down, because we're not really giving our nervous system or body the opportunity to understand where we want tension to be displaced throughout the body. So I like to focus on control, trying to be deliberate about what I'm doing here, and really trying to feel out the connection between things like my hamstring and calf as I'm going through this exercise. The more deliberate you are about the exercise, and the more you can kind of tune into your body, the more receptive or more integrated this exercise will ultimately be, which is going to reduce the likelihood of things like calf cramps from occurring later on down the road. For this next technique, we are going to want to pop up to our feet, and we are going to do a rocking standing supination. So I know that sounds like a lot, but it's not nearly as intimidating as it sounds. So what we're going to do here is we are simply going to pop up to our feet, and I initially just want you to get used to rocking your feet kind of back and forth. So we're just trying to kind of sense the weight transfer from my heel to my toe. And all I'm doing as I'm doing this is we're taking the calf through a contracted state, and then we're taking it through a lengthened state. So when we experience a calf cramp, typically we are fixated in the state of contraction. So what we were doing here is teaching the muscle it's okay to get a little bit of length and then rock back into the contraction. Once we kind of get used to that, what we're going to begin to do is take the ankle and we're just going to think about turning the ankle bones out. And what we are doing here is building on that initial rocking motion where I go into a plantar flexion and a dorsiflexion, and we're adding another function to it, which is going to be supination. And the more dynamic that my ankles, my knees, and that muscle in between, our calf muscle, can communicate with one another, the more function we're ultimately going to create through those joints. Now, the better that these joints and these muscles communicate with one another, the less likelihood we have of experiencing something such as a calf cramp or an injury through the ankle or the knee down the road. This certainly isn't going to be a very intense exercise, and that isn't the intention of it either. All we're doing here is just getting a feel for what that weight transfer feels like, and just kind of building some neurological or mind-body awareness around that sensation into the feet and into the calf muscle. I'd work through this for about 30 to 45 seconds, and that will be more than enough to get our body prepared for our next technique. For our last exercise, you're going to grab a kettlebell. You can use a milk jug, you can use a dumbbell, anything that is going to provide a little bit of weight and is going to provide a rhythm for our body to work through. And we're going to work through a pendulum swing calf raise. So what this is going to initially look like is I'm going to take the kettlebell and I'm just going to initially start by swinging it to the outside of my leg. Again, what we're doing here is taking the principles of the previous exercise with kind of that weight transfer and just kind of getting a feel for what that feels like through our foot as we are working this rhythm around it. And what's going to start to happen is I'm going to allow my arm to come up a little bit higher. And now this is when I'm actually going to come into a calf raise. So what's happening here is we are taking the applied work through our corrective exercise and we are starting to apply it in a more dynamic fashion. Now you can think the better my body operates in a more dynamic way, the better off I'm ultimately going to be. Because on a day-to-day basis, I can't be thinking about 100 different points in my body all the time. That's why we train, so we can make things a little bit more conscious within our structure. So then when we come into movement, such as this, things are happening in a more unconscious or a more reactive way. So I encourage you to bring some awareness to this exercise, but don't just force your way through it either. Really try to let the rhythm kind of carry you through and just kind of feel what that feels like to contract the calves at that top position and then kind of allow it to absorb back into the bottom phase. This exercise is up to your discretion in terms of how intense it's going to be. I would recommend starting with a 5 to 10 pound kettlebell or dumbbell, and then you can progress your way up as needed. Not only is this a great way to rehab a calf injury, but it's also a great way to strengthen the calves so we don't deal with cramps or injuries later on. Well, hopefully this video was under 10 minutes and you learned something from it. If you went through this successfully, you should be able to quickly pop down and have no calf cramps occur. That is the goal after all. If you're into content like this, something that would help me out a lot is if you liked this video. If you want more content similar to this, you can certainly subscribe to the channel, as it does just help to support the channel. And until next time, make sure you are prioritizing and then you are optimizing for you. I will catch y'all in the next one. That's coming from a Canadian, y'all. Anyways, we'll see you next time. Peace.